Okay, I like to roll here. So first, thank you for joining the webinar today on this fascinating topic: why leadership development programs fail. Greetings from Madrid, where I'm delivering this session from today. I've noticed in the chat a number of you are from all over the world, what is fascinating. And also I've seen a number of familiar faces in the chat. So welcome again, great seeing you. So in terms of today, I will do a brief introduction and then we will dive right away in the session today. From today. As you can imagine, this topic, why leadership development programs fail, is a topic that we can spend easily a half a day or a day on and drill down and have deep, dialogues and examples, etc. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time. We have about 45 to 50 minutes, and then I will do a Q&A based on any thoughts you have, any questions you have. And I want to invite all of you also to use the chat to to make any comments, to share perspectives, your own experience with this topic, and again also ask any questions you have. At the end of the session, Cristina Fernandez, who's on the call, a colleague of mine, will facilitate some of the questions that you put in the chat. And with that, let me roll. And let me go to briefly introduce myself. Some of you know me. I'm the academic director, faculty of a number of leadership programs at IE. I'm leading a center for corporate learning and HR. And this center is kind of organizing this webinar today. I'm a faculty of a number of programs, learning, leadership development, change management programs. At IE University, but I'm also affiliated with Nyenrode University in the Netherlands, and I'm also an associate professor at University of Pennsylvania, where I work with candidates in a Chief Learning Officer program. People who are earning an executive doctorate degree. Some of you might be in the session today, so also welcome. I have authored and co-authored a number of books over the last, kind of 10, 15 years. You see a few books actually here on this screen that I will refer to in the presentation today. One book that I have been co-authored with a number of my McKinsey partners. It's called Leadership at Scale, a book that was published at the end of 2018. And some of the insights that I will share today are included in that book. Also, you see a book called Elevating L&D, also co-authored with my colleagues at McKinsey, was published also in 2018, and also an exciting book for those of you who are really in the learning and leadership development profession. And finally, I have been with McKinsey and Deloitte for over 25 years as a partner, human capital leader, HR executives, and global chief learning officers. Also based on my experience, I will share some of the insights of today. And finally, I've mentioned I'm an academic director for a couple of programs. One is the Global Masterclass Learning and Development Leadership. Next program will start July 8. We are closing admissions in a week from now. We have close to 40 candidates, so a full house. We are taking, I think, one or two more candidates. Then we are launching a fantastic new program, HR Leadership in the Digital Age. That's a program that will start in January. And I'm also the academic director for an executive master in positive leadership and transformation. And this is a program based on insights from positive leadership and the neurosciences. So if you're interested, please, take a look at the programs. So exciting news today. I'd like to pre-announce a new book that I have co-authored with Jan Rijken. A book in English that will be published, hopefully July, August. So we are very excited about the book. The royalties will be donated to a foundation, eLearning for Kids. And briefly about this book, it's a book with 49 tools, and they are based on 49 questions that professionals have in learning and leadership development. And the structure of the book is that for each tool, each question, we introduce the topic. Then we have a tool, typically a graphic, an illustration, a model. We will explain the model, and very important, we will talk about how you as a professional can use the tool in your day-to-day work. So hopefully you are excited about this. We have tools on learning and development strategy, on governance and operating model, L&D enablement, learning design and development, learning measurement and impact, as well as on lifelong learning. So it's a book, 300 pages, endorsed by 25 executives from leading companies globally. So hopefully you will benefit from it when it becomes available in July and August in hard copy, and of course also in an e-copy format. That brings me to basically the theme of today, why good leadership matters. Before we dive in terms of what can go wrong when we reflect on developing leaders and organizations. And, there are a number of things to consider. One is if we reflect on, where organizations are today and what happened over the last year, a significant acceleration of the digitization of work. And, we are in the digital age. And as we all know, over the next decades, we will see massive change actually in the workforce. Organizations are accelerating their digital transformation. And if you reflect on, what enables a successful digital transformation, it all has to do with leadership capabilities. Do we have basically leaders with the right, kind of mindset capabilities? Are they digital savvy? The same applies for our workforce, right? So we'll only be successful in implementing new technologies if we have the capabilities in our organizations to support that. It also means that, we need to work in a very different way. What we have experienced over the last 1.5 years, reflecting on the huge impact from the pandemic, working from home, remotely, working with all kinds of different and new tools. But also many organizations are reflecting on what kind of HR and talent management practices they need to put in place in order to be competitive and successful. Now, we don't have time to touch on that. The key point I want to make on this slide is that why leadership matters. Leaders basically can have a huge impact on the acceleration of the digitization of work. But there's more actually. What we have learned as well, if you look at different research reports on what we are expecting from leaders in organizations, and particularly in times of change, in times of disruption. And there are a number of key themes, right? So making sure that leaders show empathy for others, are open, honest, and vulnerable, because as leaders we do not know necessarily all the answers anymore. Because our world is complex, there are many variables, we have a lack of information, and I always say strategy is all about betting on different scenarios, and to be open about it with the teams is key. Communication is critical, and I would say there's something like over communication. It's key that leaders continue to update their colleagues what's happening, what they know, what they don't know. It's also important to, in times of change and turbulence, to stay calm, right? So key that leaders are not kind of, feel overwhelmed and show that actually to people around them. The future, provide tremendous opportunities. And although a number of organizations have, a lot of challenges, it's also important that as leaders, we stay optimistic and hopeful about the future, and help to shape our organizations, and make sure that we can deliver and be successful longer term. Leading virtually, of course, is a big theme for leaders. How to build high-performing virtual teams. How to support hybrid work. Very key. Inclusive, a big theme over the last couple of years. I think more important than ever before. And finally, as leaders, we spend our time in solving problems. And, if you reflect on that, what's key is when you solve problems, there are different levels of problem solving. So the better we become in problem solving, the bigger impact it has on our organizations. And then from an overall organizational performance perspective, what we have learned from a lot of research on developing leadership capabilities is that if we have leaders who perform in the top quartile, they have a huge impact on performance. So to take a look at the numbers here. So if you have leaders who are, from an effectiveness perspective, in the bottom quartile, no impact on overall performance. If they're in the third quartile, an 8%. In the second quartile of effectiveness, 27%. And if they are in the top quartile of performance, 65%, so 2.4x more than the second quartile. So a huge case for building very strong leadership capabilities in our organizations. And as I mentioned in the introduction of this webinar, a recent survey from the Financial Times among over 300 chief learning officers globally shows that, and this is data from May 9th, that leadership development is the #1 priority for organizations. And I would argue, if you look at the topics on the left side here, of course, change management and diversity and inclusion and digital transformation and strategy and innovation are also leadership development topics. So a huge focus on leadership development. Other research reports have shown over the last year that many organizations have increased actually their spending in overall people capability development and particularly again in leadership development. So, and the theme actually of this webinar is, why does leadership development fail? What I like to do is, if this works well, I like to launch a poll and see if you can reflect actually on the question here. Most, if you agree actually with the statement, why most leadership development programs fail. So if you can vote actually, that would be wonderful to get a sense of all of us in terms of what we are thinking about this topic. And what's fascinating too, if you look at the spending in leadership development, in 2019, 2020, it's estimated that companies are spending over 360 billion on leadership development. So a huge number. So let me show actually, what you have so far. I think a few people are still completing the survey here. So let me wait a few more seconds. 80% of you have been voted. But if I look at that actually, it shows that 77% of you agree actually with this. So let me share the results with you. Somewhat agree or strongly agree. It's a very high percentage, and thanks therefore for joining this this webinar, because I hope that we can tackle kind of one of the reasons why this is happening, and also what we can do about this. So there are a couple, and I will briefly talk through about 14 reasons why leadership development programs fail or can be less effective. Not per se in order, but I will show you the key themes here. One is, if we reflect on leadership development, everything starts with reflecting on the industry that we are in as organizations, and what is our overall business strategy. So where are we, and where are we going over the next, kind of 2, 3, or 4 years. Based on that, the key question is, what are the real business challenges for leaders? And what are the key capability gaps that we see in our organizations in order to be successful in executing on the business strategy? And then it's also invaluable to reflect on, if we have a program in place that indeed will reflect on the first two questions here, then what is the overall expected impact of the program that you design, that we design and we deliver? Because if we just, if people just acquire expertise, knowledge, it doesn't mean actually that anything will change. So what is basically the expected impact of a business program? And finally, it's key to make sure that if we have a leadership program in place, that there is significant support from the top of the organization. I have, been working with clients in the past where initially there was lack support from the top, or let's say the second level of leadership. The CEO was supportive, but basically the people reporting to him were not. And as a consequence, what happened is that people who were attending different programs, they were pulled out actually by their leaders because they felt that they had to work on different activities and they had to be on conference calls and submit deliverables. And as a consequence, the impact was very limited of the program. So everything starts with, is the top of the organization really engaged and supportive of leadership programs? Make them part of the overall design. A second theme is that, many organizations have put different competency models in place. They are currently redeveloping competency models. Some of them are using external competency models. And of course, there are many competencies to develop. But the question is, which ones have the biggest impact? And this slide shows, research from McKinsey on this topic. And they have, looked at, a lot of different competencies based on a lot of data, identified the top 20 or 20. And based on the 20, identified the ones which have a huge impact on performance of organization. The number 1, the number 15, the number 19, and number 20. So key to focus on competencies that really matter. Now, of course, for every organization, this differs. For every cohort or segment of leaders, this might differ. But it's really important to reflect on what are the biggest development changes you want to make in order to have business impact. Also, what we have seen is that, if we look ahead, we are, as I mentioned before, in the digital age. And, there are basically two themes actually when it comes to leadership development. One is making sure that leaders are digital savvy, understand technologies, know how they can use them to disrupt and to advance and to innovate. And also with that, of course, big data and analytics. And secondly, it's all about, human leadership practices. How do you become a leader who can build high-performing teams, who can help to retain the best talent in your organization, how to lead change and innovation. And there are a number of, what I call human leadership practices based on, insights in positive psychology and development psychology, which have a huge impact on the quality of leadership. And again, a number of them on this slide. Another reason why leadership development fails is that a lot of focus on development is still on the weaknesses of leaders. And as you know, a lot of research has been done on developments, and here's some data and some research on this, on basically two different cohorts of leaders. For one, leaders, we have identified their weaknesses, And we said, okay, let's develop their weaknesses. And guess what? You know, they became better at their weaknesses. And another group of leaders, we identified what their strengths are, where they are very talented. And so, okay, let's focus on their strength and let's develop their strength. And what you see actually is that if you develop people their strength, they can become extraordinary. If you develop people their weaknesses, they become a little bit better in some of those competencies that they are not strong at. So, you know, this is all based on work from Gallup, strength-based development. And again, you know, if as an organization you say, do you know what, let's leverage our talents. Let's make sure that people are in roles where they can maximize their strength. Let's develop their strength. They become extraordinary. Just developing people's weaknesses will have a limited impact. Another key reason why leadership development fails is that the learners are not ready. You know, you can provide the best learning opportunities for people, programs, initiatives, you know, kind of work assignments. But if people don't have a mindset or mindsets of lifelong learners, guess what? Nothing will happen. So, so therefore, it's key that people embrace mindsets of lifelong learners. And I've done quite a bit of work on this topic. We don't have a lot of time today to go in depth. You are probably familiar on the work from Carol Dweck on growth mindsets, very important. But there are other ones too, you know, becoming a serial master. That means continue to develop yourself over your lifetime. Make sure that you stretch yourself, get out of your comfort zone, because we know that people only learn if they do something that they have never done before. It's key in order to stay employable, and if you change roles and jobs over time, that you know you are recognized for something. So have a brand and build your network. You know, learning is something that's in development, something that people need to own. Organizations can facilitate, can provide platforms, can provide support, coaching, career coaching. But at the end of the day, people need to be at the steering wheel of their own careers. And finally, it's key from a lifelong mindset perspective that people figure out what they really enjoy doing. Because if you do something you enjoy doing, you know, it doesn't take you energy to learn. You basically, it will pull you're pulling yourself there anyway, and it's very easy. So if you want to learn more about the mindsets, you can go to the website reachingyourpotential.org, and you can do a free assessment, and you get a short report on how you score actually on the mindsets for lifelong learners. So again, key is, you know, we can do everything what we want, but if leaders, if learners are not ready to learn, you know what, it doesn't have an impact. Another key theme is if we reflect on leadership programs, you know, we always have a diverse population in programs. Even if you have one segment of managers, maybe entry managers or senior managers, everyone is different and people have different expertise, different knowledge, different experience. So as a consequence, you know, basically in a class, you might have people who, you know hardly anything about a topic, and there are people who know a lot. So how can we personalize, customize learning? Now, there are a number of ways to do that. So as an example, if you launch online portals, so here on the left side, on a particular topic, let's say change management, you can identify a number of program topics. You can identify levels of proficiency. And basically, you know, leaders, based on who they are, and they can just take the learning courses, the digital ones, based on their interest and based on their level of expertise, and therefore they are, you know, customizing. Another example here on the right side is a learning journey that is part of our masterclass Learning and Development Leadership, where basically people go through a number of steps, and they are studying literature and lectures and videos and etc. And we also have curated additional content for the hungry hearts. So people who say, hey, I like to go 3 levels deep on this topic, you give them the opportunity, and therefore you can personalize. In the classroom, there are also many ways of personalize, right? So you can basically, based on experience, based on expertise, you can set up different cohorts in the class, different teams who go one level deeper than other people. So personalization in the classroom. Another way, of course, is to let people pick, different electives, topics of programs that they like to do more of or less of. So there are a lot of ways to personalize, but it's very, very important for, experienced learners. Another challenge is that learning can be offered too early or too late. If you, as an example, if you become a manager, and you are a manager for let's say 9 months, and then finally you can attend the new manager program, guess what? It's a little bit too late. But if you attend a program and you get promoted 6 to 9 months later to manager, it's too late. And we know that people forget easily what they have learned. So how do we make sure that we provide more just-in-time learning for our leaders? Another key theme is that if we reflect on what we want to achieve with any leadership program, it's all about, we want to change people's mindsets and we want to change people's behaviors. And what we see from people is basically, if we interact with leaders around us, we see kind of, how they behave. We see what kind of expertise they have, what kind of skills they have. In traditional programs, that's typically 80% of the focus. We provide people with new expertise. But if we want to change behaviors, we need to look at what's the root cause, why people are behaving the way they are behaving. Because, our beliefs, our values, our mindsets will hold us back to behave in certain ways. Therefore, we need to make sure that, our leadership programs are focusing on, the mindsets, the beliefs, the values, they tap into that. Because if we understand people better, or if we understand our leaders better, then we can help them to change and to shift. And that's very important. Another challenge is that still a lot of programs are decoupled from real work. You can go to a 3-day program or you attend an online program. But then, if nothing happens, if you just acquire expertise, it can be wonderful, it can be very interesting, but honestly, nothing will change, in most cases. Therefore, it's important that when we think about leadership development, we know that changes in behavior will take time. And therefore, we should design more learning journeys, and many executives and CLOs are moving really toward learning journeys. And learning journeys can be 3, 6, 9, 12 months and can include a number of different elements, right? Self-study, online collaboration with other people, but also field work, right? So making sure that, you get assignments on the job that, you will use during the program. And then, as you see, there's a sequence as an example, and you can do an assessment up front, and there are a number of online or physical live in-person classes. But basically, there's a lot of focus on the-job learning, how you can apply what you are learning, collaborating with people in what we call a learning pod, or a small group actually, to talk about action learning initiatives. What helps as well to provide people with additional coaching and mentoring in terms of how they can apply what they are learning. And by doing these things, actually, there's a more integration of learning and working. And that's kind of what we need. We don't want to decouple it. This is an example of one of our programs, the HR program. It will start in January, and you see actually some of the elements that I've mentioned here. The online study assignments, people work on a personal project over 6-7 months. There are different, workshops online, It's a flipped classroom program, so we don't lecture in the program. That happens, as self-paced. And when people are together, they are in workshops, they problem solve, they present work cases. And with that, it becomes really integrated with their daily work. Another key theme, and that's very close to my heart, is that, our profession, the learning sciences, leadership sciences, is a fascinating profession, as you see over here. There are many kind of, sciences that are at the foundation of the learning sciences, including the neurosciences as an example. And, there's amazing research done on how people learn and how you can design very effective learning programs. So to give you an example, right? So there are things to think about. We know that people retain knowledge if we repeat knowledge sharing. We also know that, if we use spacing, so there are a number of times, this time in between knowledge sharing will help from a memorization perspective. But also short learning nuggets are very powerful to present. So not very long, very short, so people can process it. And then, active engagement is key. We know as learners, as people, as humans, we learn by talking about what we are hearing. So active engagement is key. But also other things, right? So we know that if people sleep well, has a huge impact on learning and memorization. So we need to make sure that if we have leadership programs, it's not like, hey, we run them till late at night and people have, limited time for sleep because they want to do their email, because it has a negative impact on the learning opportunities. But also mindfulness, right? So if people's head is empty, if people are really focused and they can deep listen, that has also huge impact on our learning. So leveraging insights from the learning sciences is so important. Another key theme is learning transfer. A lot of programs have not been designed in a way that they focus on how to transfer learning on the job. They are designed to help people to understand certain things, concepts, become familiar with new topics, but not necessarily like how do you transfer what you have learned on the job. I'm a big fan of a design methodology called the 6 Ds, and you see it here on the slide, where you basically everything starts with defining your business outcomes. Then you design the experience, then you deliver the experience, but also there's a huge focus on how to drive learning transfer, very key. And if you think about the transfer, there are many things what you can do. And again, based on insights from the learning sciences, it's about reminders, about reflection, keeping people accountable, make sure that people have a coach who will help to apply and implement what people are learning. If people collaborate on topics and discuss how they can use it in their daily job, will have a huge impact. So learning transfer is very key if we design learning journeys for our leaders. Another key theme, unfortunately, is that still a lot of organizations are not necessarily measuring the impact of what they are doing. And it starts here on the left side. If you look at overall capability building in organizations, it starts again with the business strategy. And from there, we look at what are the implications for our people HR strategy. And then from there, we are looking at the capability building, the learning strategy. And there are a couple of key questions, right? So first, are we focusing on the initiatives that really will have the biggest impact on the business? And that's what I call business excellence. It's all about alignment. The second question is, how effective are we when it comes to behavioral change in organizations? So effectiveness. And third, every organization, even if some organizations might have a lot of funding for capability building and for leadership development, the question is, are you using your funding in the most efficient way? That's kind of operational excellence. And another framework here that is also part of the book that we present, this is also about measurement, and we look at learning formats, we look at employee performance, and we look at business performance, right? And also what are specific KPIs we can track when it comes to leadership development. And again, what we know is that if companies who are investing in leadership development, and if they avoid the mistakes that I share actually in this presentation, they will have a huge impact on the organization. We know that 85% of market value of S&P companies is a result of intangible assets. If you probably reflect on the people around you, on your team, and you say, well, who are the people, the 1 or 2 or 3 people? You know that if they leave the organization, it will have a huge negative impact because they know how to make things happen. They have an extraordinary impact, right? So we know actually that if we have top quality leaders, it has a tremendous impact. Another theme is that, when we think about changing behaviors and mindsets, we don't take in consideration all different aspects of how to make that happen. So as an example, we know that people will only change their mindset and behavior, of course, if they have the skills to do so, right? So, and that's typically the focus of a lot of leadership programs and learning programs, where we spend time on, okay, do people have indeed the capabilities now to show different behaviors? But that's not enough. People also will look at role models. They say, okay, if you expect me to change my behavior, what about my leader? What about others around me? Because if there are no role models of the new behavior, guess what? I might not do it myself. A third component is that there needs to be a compelling story. If we expect people to change their behaviors and we help them to develop different skills and develop different mindsets, there needs to be a story that people resonate to. Like, yeah, I understand why I need to do this, and it makes sense for me personally. And finally, it's key that we align rewards and recognitions with expected new behavior. Because I always say, if you expect people to behave A, but you reward them and recognize them for behaviors B, guess what? They will figure this out in no time, and they will not change their behaviors. So this is where I think, in our profession, OD, organizational development, has become more and more important. OD was a terrific, an exciting topic in the 90s. And then it disappeared in many organizations. However, I'm very excited that today more and more organizations are building OD capabilities. And if you look at this visual again, to look at how we can make things happen, because just developing people is not enough actually for changing mindsets and behaviors. And finally, it's also key that leaders find time to reflect. Even before the pandemic, this was a big theme. A lot of CLOs and leaders mentioned to me that leaders are busy from 8 to late. They go from meeting to conference call to email, hardly any moment to reflect. And we know that reflection is a key kind of a key component of learning. And therefore, I believe that in-person programs, but also in virtual programs, we need to make space for reflection. And also when we look ahead, there's a lot of, in every organization, there's a lot of discussion today about, okay, what do we expect people to do kind of from working, from where, past the pandemic? And a lot of organizations have decided that they don't expect that people come back to the office for 100%. A lot of organizations are saying maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days. And then the question is, how do you build culture? How do you make sure that, people feel a part of something? And what I've heard from a number of CLOs is they're saying, well, we believe that the in-person programs, leadership programs, as part of a journey, when people are together, that becomes a moment for, you know, an anchor moment for culture, for networking, for reflection. And that is badly needed in time with, you know, significant change and distraction, etc. So I like to share the last poll for today. If you reflect on, you know, some of the themes why leadership development fails. Let me see actually if I can find the poll here. Yeah, and let me see if I can launch it. To see if you can answer actually, you know, what you see as I just dropped and I showed actually a couple of reasons. You know, what do you think? What are some of the big reasons why leadership programs fail? I could not include all my 14 in the poll because of the limitations in Zoom, but I just want to get a sense of, you know, what you think, you know, what are some of the challenges here? So thank you. Results are coming in. Yeah, it looks like that the big themes that you identify is definitely learning is decoupled from real work. Very high. Again, this goes back to how can we design, you know, integrated journeys where we learned how to apply. And also that a lot of programs are not anchored in the business. So I will close the poll shortly and you can see the results yourself. So here you go. So you are less concerned about, you know, the focus on important competencies. And again, you know, we only had to pick 3, right? So, but there are many things that at the end of the day will have an impact on the quality of leadership development. But again, the number 1 is the decoupling from work and, you know, programs not anchored in business context. So thank you for sharing the results from this poll. So yeah, so at the end, actually, again, finally, you know, I've mentioned already the executive master, if you want to reflect on that in the future. And with that, well, first, feel free, if you are not connected with me, I'm sharing a lot of, you know, information on LinkedIn on a regular basis. But I like to open the floor for a couple of questions. And Christina, if you can take a look at the chat and maybe if there are some questions, it would be wonderful.
Of course there are. Thank you so much, Nick. And it's great because the you know, the audience is being quite active along the session. So if you please can continue posting your questions, I would like Nick to ask the first one. They were agreeing with your statement about how important it is that senior executives would be part of programs, not only supporting them, but being even teaching them and being part of them. And here's the question. Can leaders lead, and executive and senior executive leaders can lead the same way employees from different generations?
Yeah, I think, Christina, I think in terms of leader-led learning, right? So a couple of thoughts on that. Well, first, I think that having leaders who are not just showing up at the beginning of a program and welcoming everybody and then, you know, leave, that's not what I'm looking for. It's basically what we know from a best practice perspective is that we have leaders who are actively part of a program, part of panels, They might facilitate some sessions. They will be in the program at different moments for questions and answers. So I think that, to me, that is key. But also from an action learning perspective, if we have customized programs where participants work on specific challenges, action-based learning projects, that's where they also interact with their leaders, their senior leaders, executives, on what they are doing. So that's also a powerful, very powerful application. Now, from a teaching perspective, also what I've seen and heard is that, of course, not every leader is the best facilitator per se. And therefore, there are a couple of options. One is that, as an organization, you provide leaders with opportunities to learn to become a good facilitator, teacher. And, in my previous firms, McKinsey and Deloitte, we had extensive programs in place for partners and senior managers and directors to become excellent in facilitating. So that's one thing. And of course, if that doesn't do it, then you have to make sure that, you have your executives only involved in areas where it makes sense, right? So, but deep involvement is key. I always say, if you want to design and program for your top leaders in the organization, if the CEO is not part of it, forget it. Don't do it, right? So, because it won't go anywhere. And when it comes to generations in the workforce, it's like, yes, we have, in every organization, almost 5 generations, including the Gen Z. People are born after 1995, who are now in their early 20s, who are joining organizations. I think that's the life of our organizations, multiple generations. And I think that also from a reverse counseling, mentoring perspective, there are great examples where, more senior leaders are leveraging, the fact that they have young people in their organization.
Okay, thank you very much. And they are quite interested about knowing if you would prioritize those 14 items. Is there any that is more important than the others?
I would say, I think they basically, they are holistic. They work together. And if some of them are not in place, or let me say differently, you could argue that on every example, you could be on the scale 1 to 10. An example, is the program anchored in a business on a scale 1 to 10, or is the program designed based on insights from the learning sciences on a level 1 to 10? So, of course, if you have a program that is not anchored in the business, guess what? You can design the best program in the world, but it will not have impact, right? But also the other way around. You can launch a program that is, kind of makes all sense for the company, but if it's poorly designed and you don't take care of learning transfer, guess what? It also won't have an impact. So it's important to look at all these 14 dimensions, so 14 topics, and ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how well are you doing? Now, of course, it's impossible to do on every dimension a 10 out of 10, right? And that's okay, that's fine. But I think there's still many programs that I've seen where on a number of these dimensions, we are scoring low. And that's why the impact is not what what it could have been.
Now, we have a very practical question, Nick. They would like to have your advice about methodologies to measure ROI.
Yeah.
For leadership development programs.
So yeah, thanks, Christina, and thanks for the question, Derek. So let me share you my personal point of view on ROI. I have seen a lot of studies on ROI calculations in learning and leadership development, and I don't believe that as an organization you can really do a thorough and a thorough ROI, a real return on investment on leadership programs. The reason is there are basically too many variables. There are too many variables, and there's also a level of uncertainty. And as a consequence, you go to your CFO and you come like, I have an ROI of this program of 365%, and your CFO will pick this apart in seconds. So therefore, many organizations agree that, you know, that's the case. Now, there are a lot of things you can measure. That's also what I believe, right? So you can measure, of course, if you are offering programs to support specific business goals. You can also look at if you offer programs, are they attended by the right people? You can also measure if people are changing their behaviors. You can also look at if people's performance is changing. You can also look at turnover of people, right? So one of the things that I have looked at in the past is that at McKinsey, where we have learned that people who have received more development are less likely to leave. So it has an impact on turnover. So there are a number of things you can measure. I would say I would stay away from the pure ROI, it's not necessarily needed. And there's also, and it's also, I'm excited about this too, in a number of organizations that believe that investing in leaders makes all sense. Now, of course, you need to invest in the right leaders. You need to invest in the right programs. You need to make sure that you measure how effective programs are. But there's an overall belief that investing in leaders makes sense. It's similar to, let's say, I always say, you know, if you have children, you know, I always say, no parent will go to an elementary school and will ask the principal, can you show me the ROI if I send my child to your school for elementary school education? No one. And it's like, because we believe and we know that sending kids to school will help them to develop themselves. And I have the same, you know, belief in when it comes to developing people. You know, developing people will have impacts. Now, again, the key question is, are we doing the right thing? We have the right program, the right people, the right quality? Exactly. That matters.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. We have a question from Annalie Lander that is a very good one about willingness to change. Like, yeah. What would happen if there is a rationale saying that, yes, a leadership intervention and program intervention is needed, but really you feel there is no that willingness on top management to change? How can you change that? What can you do? Yeah. No, I think it's a very good question, right? So, and as we all know, change is hard, not just for other people, also typically for ourselves. It's hard to change habits. It's hard to change behaviors. And what I believe is that what is key to every kind of change kind of initiative is that we need to work really hard and collaborate with the people involved to have a strong kind of, you know, story why it makes sense to change. I give you one example. Lifelong learning sounds exciting for a number of people, particularly those of us who are excited about, you know, education and development, etc. But it's not necessarily the case for a lot of people, actually. When a lot of people think about lifelong learning, and particularly people and colleagues with lower education backgrounds, and again, this is based on research, when they think about lifelong learning, they think about school. When they think about school, they think about not necessarily a great experience because of grades, because of other things, and therefore they are not excited kind of going back to school. Now, what people are interested in, if I ask people like, hey, are you interested in working until retirement and making a living? Everybody said, yeah, I am open for that. Are you interested after retirement to be financially secured, that you are doing okay? 100%. Okay. If that's what you believe, then you know what? In our world, there's no other choice than continue develop yourself. And as an organization, we can help you and we will help you with that. So it goes back to what kind of story are we telling and how are we engaging people in the story? Wonderful. Nick, we are reaching almost the end, and there is a great question, especially now that we are hopefully finishing the pandemic. We are used to hear about the role of technology in programs and learning, but what about the role of coaches and trainers? Which is the role now of these educators? And which is, following the question, which is the best mental and emotional state for trainers now with the kind of programs that we have?
Yeah, no, I think that, I think post-pandemic, what I'm hearing from many kind of CLOs and executives in learning and development and leadership development is that, of course, what we have learned over the last 1.5 years is that some of the online learning is extremely powerful. Similar to the webinar we have today, where we can reach out to everybody around the world. It's invaluable. Also, what I have learned is that building strong connections with people, emotional connections, you can also do that actually online. Of course, the cohort needs to be, limited, and you need to spend, and from a design perspective, the efforts in designing the experience that people are more open and vulnerable, and you can really build a very personal relationship with people. So I think that will stay partly. And what I believe is that, there's a need as humans, we have a need to connect, to see people. So there also will be a need, an ongoing need for coming together and, being in an in-person class. And as I said, as part of an overall learning journey. But I think it will be different than, it has been the case in some training programs in the past. It will not be anymore about PowerPoint deck sharing. When we are together, it's all about skill practice. It's about reflection. It's about doing something with your cohorts that you cannot do in a virtual event. It's about culture. It's about networking. So I think what we do in an in-person class will change and will become better, actually. And when it comes to coaching, we also have learned that, a lot of coaching can happen online. Virtual. I do it myself with a number of people I'm coaching, and through Zoom it can be very effective. And sure, there are also people say, I live around the corner. It's very convenient for me to just step by and to be in an office or in another location where we can see each other. Or it's a matter of let's start together live, and then we can have a couple of sessions virtually. And then, we have another live session, right? So I think there will be a lot of things that we will start blending, and we will learn from that. So in short, I'm very optimistic. If you are a trainer, a facilitator, a coach, that, there will be tremendous opportunities in helping our workforce for future development.
Thank you so much, Nick. We are having a few questions from a logistics perspective. First of all, yes, the webinar is being recorded, so you will find it on the website next week. And Nick, they are asking if they could have a PDF version of the slides. What do you think about that? Yes, I will make that available. Yeah, I will make that available. So we will share it with all of you. So thank you very much for staying with us today, for posting all these questions. And Nick, how would you like to say goodbye? Yeah, no, all of you, I thank you for dialing in from all over the world today. It was a pleasure. I hope there are a couple of key takeaways. As I mentioned, this is a fascinating topic. We need to do more and learn more about this. And I look forward to seeing you at one of the next webinars that we are hosting in July. And then we will be back in September. And I hope to connect with you on LinkedIn. And hopefully you will benefit from some of the books actually that we also have mentioned here. So thank you, Christina, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you all. Or evening. Yes.